And we have some special guests with us this evening. It's the Creekside Bear Scouts, Pack 384, and they're going to help us lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening. Thanks for coming this evening. Thank you. Whenever you guys are ready, you can start. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. We appreciate it. Item number 3 is roll call.
Trustee Petrucci?
Here.
Trustee Harper?
Here.
Trustee Germain is absent. Trustee Kalani?
Here.
Treasurer Horney is absent. Clerk Hopkins here. Supervisor Fountain?
Here.
We have quorum of the board. We also have present Township Manager James Wick.
Thank you. Item number 4 is approval of our meeting agenda.
So moved.
Second. Motion by Trustee Kalani, second by Trustee Petrucci. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item number 5 is call to the public. Anybody this evening at call to the public? Being none, we'll move on to item number 6, approval of our consent agenda.
Move. Support.
Motion by Trustee Petrucci, second by Trustee Harper. Is there any discussion? Being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item number 7 is pending business. And I have a presentation this evening on safer roads and pathways. Manager Wickman.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. First of all, I'd like to recognize the work that the task force has put into this, as well as staff. We do have a couple task force members with us tonight. If you want to raise your hand, just for so the board can recognize you. It's been a pleasure to work with them since November. As we've met, they've done an excellent job of really cutting through these issues, wrestling with choices, and coming up with some very strong recommendations for the board to consider. This was in response to years and years of conversations with residents about the concern of the condition of the roads and the lack of walkable and bikeable opportunities for our community. That was affirmed in our citizen survey a couple of years ago, that those 2 areas were at the top of the list of issues that needed to be addressed. And we've formed this task force to dive in and try to identify, fully identify the problem, take a look at what options there were, and come up with some recommendations. And so tonight it's a draft plan. It is far from final. We'll be looking for some feedback and consensus from the board this evening. As you will recall, the next phase is really about a public conversation. We've had the opportunity to have almost 30 citizens plugged into this task force and get a wide variety of views, but we're looking to take that conversation to many more. And so really from here, after tonight, we will start those conversations. There'll be public meetings held here and in other places convenient to the residents. We would be engaged in that conversation through social media and through surveying, just to get feedback about this plan. And then ultimately the goal would be to, after we've done a lot of listening to the residents, determine what revisions may need to be done to this plan to finalize it. So that's really the course we're on. Tonight is just one of many steps we're taking here. It's a good one. So I'll go through the plan, and you've got a copy in front of you, and I won't read it word for word. You've got a good understanding of the background of the issue. I just sort of mentioned it there. There's a set of recommendations, and there's an executive summary there that you can get to the point for you. We had a number of residents that stepped up onto that committee, and we very much appreciate them. This, just so you know, the final draft of this map will have a better resolution map. This is a placeholder for now. But the first map in your packet shows the existing inventory of roads. What roads are currently county public roads that are either paved or gravel. And out of 94 miles of such roads in the township, 57 of them are paved, 37 are gravel roads. And so you'll see that reflected in the recommendations that will address both of those types of roads. We know the issue. The issue really is that roads are bad. The system of funding roads in Michigan is broken. We know that the governor addressed that in his State of the State address last year and has not gotten much traction with that in Lansing. And, you know, while those conversations are still going on, we also know that if anything happens, even if the governor's ask were fully fulfilled, that money does not go to these local roads that we're talking about. That goes to the state trunk lines. That goes to the interstate. These we're talking about are local roads that our residents use to get around. These are the roads that we use for alternate routes. And so the committee's focus was on coming up with solutions locally because others are not going to help us in that regard. I mentioned the survey being key to that, and we know that the County Road Commission, of course, is responsible for the roads. They have authority over the roads. They receive the funding from the gas tax and other sources. And at the end of the day, we don't have any questions that they are doing the best that they can with the money that they receive. Again, state funding for roads being broken as it is, we looked at those things several different ways, and it's just the same conclusion, is that, you know, there's no reason to villainize them. They're doing what they can and using all the budget dollars.
James, I think an important element to speak about is that we're last out of all the counties, too, in funding.
Yeah. And the per capita dollars...
84 out of 84.
That is a key, and that's an issue, and you know, northern Michigan counties get a lot of that funding, or a higher per capita. There's a lot of different political reasons for that. You know, whatever those reasons or excuses are, we're last on the list. We have we got the task force together, and really it's worth highlighting. There were a couple of key bullet points that were driving our mission, and these, of course, came from board conversations. Is that, you know, outcome of this is that we want to see improved road safety, to see less accidents. We want to see our property values protected by having good road infrastructure and good walkable, bikeable opportunities. We'd like to see the vehicle maintenance costs go down by having better roads in better condition. I'd like to see, you know, a safer and shorter travel times and alternate routes. We think that having good road and pathway infrastructure is very much a piece of what gives a community its value, its sense of place, the quality of life in that community. Economic development is obviously an important part of having good roads and pathways. And I mentioned walking and biking is, you know, particularly on the survey, we're well below the benchmark because we lack those opportunities in the community. So with that charge, the task force has been meeting, and started by exploring the issue, taking an inventory of the issues. And the paved roads, we refer to PASER ratings. PASER is a national standard for rating the condition of the surface of a paved road, and that goes from 1 to 10, 1 being worst, 10 being best. And you can divide those numbers up into 3 categories as being good, fair, or poor. And the reality is we just had these PASER ratings done. Actually, the county, in conjunction with Southeast Michigan Council of Governments, had just updated their PASER inventory in the township, and 60% of our roads were in that condition of poor, a 1 to 4. That's 60% of the miles of paved roads in the township is in poor condition. 28% of them being fair, and only 6% being in that good condition. This is a recipe for bad things, as we already know, but the real issue is, once a road gets bad, it's a lot more expensive to get back to good. It's much easier to take a good road, use good preventative maintenance, and keep it up than it is to turn a bad road back to good. Yeah.
Yeah, can you explain a little bit more about the large difference between, say, a 5 and 6 and 7? You go from 1 to 10,000 to 200 to 250, and why that is?
Yeah, I mean, you just get really into the structure of the road. If you do preventative patching and crack sealing and just going through and keep the elements out from the base of the road, you can preserve that surface for a good long time and keep it at a good condition. Once you get those cracks and the potholes and erosion going on, once that gets in, now in order to rehabilitate that road, you're talking about either pulverizing it and starting over and putting brand new asphalt over top of that, or even worse, you have to go in and undercut the base. You have to go in and dig out what's there and put down new good stone or sand or whatever base is needed. That's where it gets really expensive. If you can just keep the surface good and do preventative maintenance, you're in a better position. As far as the gravel roads and the path, I'll start with the gravel roads. Right now, limestone roads work. They work best when you put down fresh limestone. You use four good chloride applications a year in conjunction with good grading. You put a limestone surface down, you grade it multiple times a year, you put a good crown to it to give it some drainage, you use the chloride to get that cohesion, to get the compaction down, and you've got a good hard driving surface to drive on. Many people may not even tell you're not on a paved road. And there are many communities around us that have that condition for a number of reasons, but they have been able to take good care of those roads, and as we'll talk about later, road millage being one funding source, and more than half of the townships in the county have some sort of road millage. They're able to do that. That's what we don't have. We have, and then the other key is that limestone does have to be replaced every 5 to 7 years, because as you grade the road, you break up the limestone into smaller and fine particles, and then you lose your ability to get a good compact surface. So you have to have that regular program of replacing the limestone, chloriding, grading, and so on. We're missing that. We don't have many roads that have newer limestone. We're only able to do chloride 2 and 3 times a year, and the grading isn't keeping up with getting that water off of the road so it doesn't erode it. That's the issue with our gravel roads for the most part. And then pathways, it's a simple description. Walking and biking, healthy recreational living is an important part of quality of life. It's an important part of the health of our families. But it really is what defines communities that have that sense of place, that have the healthy and sustained property values. These are things that we are lagging behind, like I say, in the benchmarks. And so this was the statement of the problem. We have several pathways that are disconnected, or there's gaps in them. That's just really lacking in our community. This first map does show, again, the final maps will be a higher resolution, have pathway, show the existing pathways. You can see the gaps in there. You can see the patchwork and how they lack connectivity. And then it's jumping ahead a little bit. We just had to fit it in here for room. It's talked about a little later on. We do have in the proposal to find a way to make some of those connections. We'll talk about those in a little more detail in a minute. So the task force, having kind of taken an inventory and taken a look at all the issues that we're trying to address, then had to take a look at that, what are the costs of those issues? What are the potential, what's the funding sources for those things? What they looked at, and we'll look at that. They looked at traffic counts. They looked at other data. They went and looked at them for themselves. They tried to draw some priority to them. They really went through these issues in good detail. The next couple of pages talk about the prioritization that they first did. This is not the plan yet. This is just simply taking the highest priority roads and kind of just setting them side by side, taking a look at, the length of the section, what kind of Payser rating they have to the surface, what kind of traffic counts do they have on those roads, and then they took that list and had prioritized it, as you see here, from top to bottom. We looked at these stretches of road in order as being higher priority. Of course, you see traffic was a driver for many of those decisions, and that was how they ranked them first. This is before looking at costs, before looking at feasibility of funding. This is just simply taking the issues and prioritizing them. As you see,
fair to say, looking at all these Payser ratings, we're looking at is roads that fall well below the good designation.
Yeah, 1 to 4 is a poor. They're not even in the fair range. We've got a couple sections of them that, for whatever reason, are above to a 5, 6, or 7, probably because of some patchwork fix that had been done, because Payser ratings are done in smaller sections. But they're definitely some of the worst, if you will. And
again, these all come from the analysis from the Livingston County Road Commission.
Yeah, the Road Commission is the source of a lot of the data. They provided recommendations. Again, going back to the history, we know that we had a road committee looking at these things over many years. Most recently was back in 2010 when there had been another a road millage proposed that the voters did not approve, and there's some similar themes from that time and from that committee's work. This prioritization will come is of value for planning purposes. As we get to the recommendations in the plan, you'll see that, of course, our ability to tackle all of these is just not feasible. But what we will have is then, if for some reason we can get to the Phase 1 projects and we have the ability to tackle the next one, we can refer to these lists as a way to help those decisions. On the gravel road side, there are certainly a number of roads that had been identified. Gravel roads don't have a Payser rating because there's not a paved surface, but certainly the task force had considered the condition of those roads as well as the traffic counts that are there. And again, this is the prioritized list of those gravel roads prior to looking at costs. We looked at stretches of pathways, specifically those that are missing or gaps or disconnected, and we just provided a reference for the number of feet that are involved in that. These are prioritized again, and we can talk about these in a little more detail as we get into the plan recommendations for which pieces they're looking at, and we can refer back to that map. Through the process, certainly there were a number of other road and pathway-related issues that had been identified. These were issues that they saw contributing, that they weren't necessarily capital projects or specific lengths of roads, so to speak, but they were issues that contributed to the state that we're in, and that if they could be addressed or improved, would help out, whether it's safety or helping protect the asset and so on. And this list here is also listed by priority. They rank these in order as what they saw as the most important. The road chloriding and grading programs being one of those. But there are couple of things worth noting there that we'll get to a little bit later on when it comes to the recommendations.
Can I ask a quick question? Certainly to be perhaps a controversial issue is going to be a township-wide trash collection. Years ago, that was something that was pondered by the township before this board was on the board. And I think, can you kind of explain why that became a priority?
I can, if you don't mind, when I get to the plan. That does show up in the recommendations later.
Okay.
And I can cover that at that time.
Thank you.
So now we get into specific recommendations of the task force, and there are a number of them. This page starts off diving right into the capital project piece of it, and before we get into those projects, there is a recommendation on the table, and that is obviously funding is the issue here. And after some good, healthy conversations among the task force, they've come to this consensus on looking at a 1.5 mil ballot question for 10 years for this November's ballot. That did not come about easily. Like I say, there was quite a bit of dialogue around that. That is more than what had been asked for in 2010. That is more in line, somewhere in the middle third of township millages in Livingston County, for what it's worth. As I mentioned, there are 9 townships right now. More than half of the townships in Livingston County do have road millages, and you have them anywhere from under a mill up to 2 mills, and ours is in that middle third group. This 1.5. As you will recall, the most recent millage elections in the county had been the Genoa was just this last November. They were asking for about 1.5 mills for 15 years. That was not approved. Just the year before, Green Oak Township had asked for 1.6 or so mills for 15 years. That one was approved. That was some of the factors that led to that number. What will be important is that now that we've come with this recommendation, and now as we enter into that public participation piece, is when we say doing a lot of listening, this will be one of the many things we'll be doing a lot of listening on, is what if there is an appetite for our residents to see the value out of this plan and a willingness to do 1.5 mills or do less than that. And if the feedback is 1.5 mills isn't the right number, the task force is prepared to reconsider that. So for now, this is the recommendation. And with that, there are a number of projects, worthy projects, that they feel can be completed. What you have here, the estimates are pending, unfortunately. We have ongoing conversation with Road Commission. They've been very helpful in this process. They've got a backlog of requests for specific cost estimates for these projects that we're waiting on. What we are confident of is a couple of things. All of these projects were previously estimated just a few years ago, so we can take those numbers and make some assumptions about inflation. We can make some assumptions about a contingency, about the bond costs, those types of things. But and that gets us sort of to the total number, and we're confident that we're in the ballpark of that. that we will fit that all within what the millage proceeds would be. The other thing I failed to mention is the recommendation here is to do all these projects in the first year or two of the program, to bond for those costs, and that way we get the benefit right away with that, rather than spreading it out over 10 years and waiting for cash flow to pay for those. So, you have here the paved road segments that are being recommended for rehabilitation. The exact scope of work to be done is yet to be determined. That's being finalized by Road Commission. Again, we had their recommendations from a few years ago. Unfortunately, some of those roads have gotten worse, and so the program that might have worked a few years ago may not be good enough today, and so we're waiting on that from them. It should be noted that the Road Commission will definitely be a partner in these projects if they're carried out. They, generally speaking, they try to contribute the engineering costs and the construction oversight. It can't be said for sure whether they can provide that in all of these cases. They do have other townships who are looking at road millages themselves, and if everybody is asking for that help, they only have so many resources, but we've gotten preliminary indication that they can help us at least most of the way, if not all, depending on how many projects come at them. So those are the roads, looking at getting pavement maintenance on them. And then we have the gravel road segments. There are a few of them, and they're significant ones. These are highly traveled gravel roads that they're looking at. And one in particular is one that has been identified for paving, and that is on Hacker Road, to finish the paving that comes up the golf club, take it up to 59.
Does that represent half of it, or is that all of it?
That is half of it, and that is a border road shared with Osceola Township. As you know, we've been talking to them for a number of years, and they've always expressed interest to split the cost of that paving. I can say with confidence that really is the thing that sort of pushed this more to the front of being a candidate for paving. If it weren't for that, Hacker Road isn't necessarily the number one gravel road on the list. But when you have an opportunity to leverage dollars and get a match, that's what we would be looking at. And they have reiterated their interest to participate in that. The caveat is that they would not be prepared to participate on that right away. It would have to wait a couple of years, but it'd be well within the first part of the millage. Yes.
You talk about leveraging dollars. If we were to do something like this, is there an opportunity where the Road Commission may be leveraging certain dollars that they would have considered some of these things on their list, so that we could leverage, instead of just simply getting construction oversight and engineering, actually maybe pull ahead some of the projects that they had on their books? Is there any of these, are any of the projects on their list of things that they intend to do? Do you know? No, not these are. Probably the most likely candidate for any of that might be Fenton Road, because it is considered a major county road. The reality of it is, if they don't have this funding, they wouldn't have the funding to do it. Now, that being said, I mean, they would be looking to contribute staff in the engineering and the construction engineering. Otherwise, the amount of dollars that they have available to leverage, so to speak, isn't much. I mean, we've seen it the last couple of years. They've come out with $200,000, maybe $300,000 at most, to throw it in the trough for all the townships to fight over, basically, to say, get us your project, and whoever matches the highest wins. Whoever can make this money go the furthest, we'll give you a piece of that. Our share of $200,000 or $300,000 doesn't put much of a dent in this. But if it gets to, if it ends up they don't have enough to engineer, I think we'll be able to leverage the best we can out of them. Now, the other potential source of funding is to try to look at, might be a Fenton Road is a good example,
might be to try to get on the list for regional transportation dollars that come from MDOT. That's a tough one, too, because the other roads throughout the region that would be in competition for that, and the traffic counts on those don't necessarily bode well. It is safe to say that this plan, it was not 100% concrete, pardon the pun, in that no doubt the township would look to make the wisest decision with these dollars. If an opportunity came about for a grant or some other cost sharing that, fit into the plan and was a way to maximize the return on the tax dollar, we would definitely pursue that.
James, when we met with Mike Crane, he did say that there's an eagerness to pave township roads that are abutting each other because they're very difficult to have an agreement put together.
Yeah.
So he said that there would be most like a willingness to maybe participate in that a little further than what they would in other projects.
Well, and I think
that is true.
I think that there's a couple, at least on our end, with Clyde Road, which doesn't straddle Tyrone Township, but the truth is that's a major east-west artery. You've got Clyde Road, and I know that on the Oakland County side they've been improving that side as well. So then, what it is part of it is relieving traffic off the main arteries, and also being able to relieve it by having other avenues by which people can travel. I just think that the Pleasant Valley, which is the south end of Fenton Road, which was left unpaved, it's the only section. I really don't think the township should be. I don't have a problem with graveling it, but not paying any money to pave that. But if there's any hope of that getting paved, and that becomes a priority, and we can assist in that through, assistance with the county, then we should look at that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a major thoroughfare. Everyone takes that. Far more cars outside the township take that pathway to, I-96. So, anyway, I think that we need to look at that, and if there are regional dollars that can be leveraged, I want to make sure we pursue that.
And we've had those conversations, those exact ones, and they were very serious conversations about it's difficult to justify the use of Hartland Township tax dollars only contributing to those roads that obviously are carrying traffic from other counties, let alone other communities. So they understand that, and we would certainly be on the lookout for opportunities.
So just so you know, I live off that Pleasant Valley, so I would love to have it, but I do understand that the vast majority of people traveling that road are from out of county or out of township.
Are you going to have an opportunity to ask questions about funding, or can I ask just a quick couple?
Yeah, sure.
Did the task force have an opportunity, since they're not the township's responsibility, so if we have to go out and bond this project, have we looked at the state or the county to give us a low-interest financing or something other than bonding? Have we started that process? You'd think the state would encourage, if the local communities are going to be responsible for taking care of their roads, that there should be some type of opportunity for low interest rates other than doing the traditional bonding. It gets to be expensive since we have to do all the legwork, and we're at the mercy kind of what the market is bearing at that point.
The state has a number of revolving funds. I'm not aware of one for roads, and I'm not aware of even USDA rural development looking at roads. They have those types of funds for sewer, water, those types of community assets, just not roads. It would be bonding. Would it be worth asking the legislation or somebody to look at it, or you could certainly ask. I wouldn't hold my breath, is all. I'm not dismissing that it's a serious issue that deserves being asked, to say, like, if you're trying to help us and this buck is getting past us, which is what it is, at least give us, let us get our best return on our dollar by minimizing interest costs. Sure.
But in that vein, and along those same lines, at the end of the day, the legislature is running up against what the governor's plan in terms of road dollars, and maybe what we need to do is send a clear message to our Livingston County delegation that economic development turns on having decent roads in this state, and some other changes that need to be made, perhaps load changes and everything else on vehicles, because this is getting ridiculous. Our roads are the worst in the whole, I think they're the worst in all 50 states, even worse than Alaska and some other states that have much worse weather than we probably have. So it's ridiculous.
There are some issues there. Michigan does have one of the highest weight limits, certainly in the Midwest, and that doesn't help the situation. Then next are some pathway recommendations. There are, I did get some preliminary questions that I thought were fair, in as much as the goal here is to provide some connectivity and some contiguous stretches of walkable, bikeable opportunities. There was a question about the recommendation to go easterly with that path rather than westerly towards a more denser population.
On M59.
On 59, yeah. So this is, the recommendation is to take that path on the asphalt path on the north side of 59 and extend that all the way to Fenton Road. If you recall, the ranking list included consideration of taking that west towards the denser subdivisions. That did not translate into the rankings. I cannot independently recall the task force consideration in that and why that was. If there is a question about that, or really any of these that the board would like further consideration on, I'm sure that they would listen to that feedback if there's some thought there.
That's on page 9.
Yeah, if you go back up, you can see that the red lines here indicate the recommended projects for pathways.
Wasn't the concern that investing in that in the event that gets widened, wasn't that discussed?
You could, that would certainly be a concern. I don't know how realistic though it is at this point, because everything we can see is that widening project's not happening anytime in our near future. The fact that they did the resurfacing kind of put the lid on that, although I think it was already dead. So it's many years away, but that would be a concern. Now, for what it's worth, if the pathway is established and they come in and widen it, 20 years from now, their practice has been to, provide part of the project, that replacement path that may need to be moved.
It doesn't, well, there's a lot of existing sidewalk already on that side. Perhaps the task force could look at, see how much it costs to complete that, going to the west.
On the north side or the south side, or
whatever side makes sense. I mean, at least have a number so you can look at it. It's partly on one side of the road, then you go. It's almost, if it was all on the same side of the road, you'd have it done. Close anyway.
Yeah. Right. Then the next set of priorities are those other contributing factors. We talked about chloride and grading, trash collection. Garbage trucks are heavy, and we all know when a heavy vehicle is on a roadway how much more stress that adds and how much that contributes to the deterioration of what's under the road and eventually what's on top of the road. That's just the reality. And right now, we have several companies. Everybody picks their individual company they want to work with, and that means main roads, subdivision roads, see several garbage trucks every week coming to serve those sprinkled customers. And there is no doubt that increase in those heavy vehicles is a contributing factor. It's not the the factor. It's one of many. It just isn't helping the fact. And, as much as, these conversations happen in this community in past years, it may be coming to a head here in the conversation. The task force is recommending that the township look strongly at a unified trash collection system, so that instead of multiple, you have one each week going down those roads. You can do that a number of different ways, and in ways that doesn't mean that it has to be one carrier for the whole township. You can segment the township, or you can do it all as one. In addition to the benefit on the roads, there are other benefits that many communities realize from that. It is cheaper. The con to that is that if, for you or I that may have a long-standing relationship with an existing collector, that means a lot too. And and not every collector offers the same service, or in some people's eyes, the same level of service. These are all considerations. This is not a recommendation that comes lightly, and one that we'll obviously have to wrestle with. We have neighboring communities that do this, and they see their costs are much less, and it is a benefit to the roads. So it is a recommendation. We don't have to obviously decide that tonight. That is for your consideration. Another issue, there are a number of issues happening down in the village, and of course the village plan took a look at a lot of these road and pathway considerations, and there are a number of recommendations there, but really the underlying concern is the storm sewer there. It's very old, it's undersized, it's deteriorating, and to make investments in the village is a difficult thought without considering dealing with the underlying issue at the same time or first. So there is a recommendation to find a way to look at that, and I think within the amount of money there and in other funding opportunities which we'll talk about, there is already a drain district around that storm drain that could participate in those costs. I think it's a doable one for us to consider. Again, that's a recommendation. And then there's a couple other things that are left in here for potential consideration. We continue to work with MDOT in monitoring how the M59 improvements are working. Sign and signal improvements may help traffic concerns there, and if for some reason we identify a solution, we could potentially help drive that and make it happen. Another concern brought up was just making sure that we have clear sight lines at the intersections, make sure the mowing is happening. That recommendation is being carried out by the Road Commission. Road Commission has been very responsive to issues we've identified where vegetation seems to be making it difficult. They do come out and address that, so there's not necessarily any dollars at this point going to it. This is just good maintenance. And then the final recommendation was to take a look at the Dunham Road Bridge. That's the one just east of Clark, that we want to make sure that performs well. Probably what's involved there is giving some asphalt approaches to help protect the integrity of that bridge. And if you recall, on the gravel road project list, Dunham Road was identified for some treatment.
So James, that number there, that 6,300 or 630,000, is that money that is that tied to a millage, or that figure would do all of those things, or
no?
What is that?
It's what's left over from what's left over, and so the key would be to take this money and try to make as much of this happen as possible. I'm doubtful that all of that could be accomplished with that money, but it potentially could. And there's a number of things at play. Again, if opportunities come up or other projects where we can leverage more return on the dollar, we would look at those. There are other things further down on that list that didn't make it here that could be considered. But with this category, it's making the most with that dollar without specifically tying it to a project.
So specifically, I guess my question is about the township-wide tax collection. Is the recommendation that if if we go with the ballot proposal and it's passed, that we'll institute that and include it in
The cost?
Right.
No. It would be, I'm sorry, that's a little bit misleading because you've got these other projects, not all of them are tied to dollars, at least from the millage funding. It is, that would be recommended to look at a user fee basis.
James, I have one question.
Yep.
On the bottom of page 14, it says maintenance for the millage duration is included in the estimates. What does that mean?
So we, and this is an ongoing conversation as well with the road commission. I mean, if you put in a brand-new paved road or brand-new gravel road, and over the life of a 10-year millage, you want to make sure that it gets taken care of. And as I mentioned earlier, limestone really optimally should be replaced about every 5 to 7 years. And so included in this price is those gravel roads that are getting a treatment here.
Getting a second treatment.
They would get a second treatment when they're needed.
That was my question.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
So, we're using round numbers. A 10-year, 1.5 mil would collect $9 million. These projects, including bonding costs estimates, is what it added up to the $9 million. There's some discussion about the different funding options they had looked at. Another one of the recommendations worth noting is to leverage these dollars from the millage to demonstrate to the residents the township's commitment to these things. There is a recommendation to double the amount of general fund investment in roads and pathways. That's based on this coming year proposed budget of $80,000 that is for the dust control road chloriding program, as well as street lights, and doubling that number to $160,000. That is, and that $160,000, could be used on some of these other projects or to match cost sharing, that kind of thing. That is a recommendation that the board consider that. Other funding options, we of course know SADs have been used on some local roads. Those are always possible. Cost sharing with Osceola or the Road Commission, we would look for those opportunity grants we talked about. One grant that we are taking a closer look at is Safe Routes to School for Pathways. We're waiting to hear back from them on whether they feel that we're competitive in that one based on the count of walkers to the main school campus area. As soon as we hear that, we'll let you know. So all said, we have this map shows all of the proposed projects for roads, not pathways, on the map. Some of these again, these are placeholders. They'll be corrected because we're missing some stretches here. Fenton Road would be treated all the way M59 to the north. Hacker Road would stop at 59 and go south. That's the paving. You've got some other stretches for treatment shown. As I mentioned, the next phase is public participation. Does the board have any questions or thoughts? Or
can you explain that process, the public participation and what that entails, and people will be notified and such?
Right. I mentioned it a little earlier, but we will use all methods of communication for the residents. We will we'll look to. We have some residents who we've already identified that we're going to share this plan with pretty much right away, and we've invited them to a task force meeting coming up in March. These are residents that, kind of we see on a regular basis, and so they'll be a part of the initial focus group, so to speak. There'll be a series of public meetings here at these meetings, and if there's opportunities to go out into a coffee shop or somewhere local, or we're certainly willing to go and talk to homeowners associations or civic organizations and share this plan with them and answer questions and do a lot of listening. We'll take that conversation online through Facebook, and we've got a new tool that we're getting ready to roll out here called Mind Mixer. It's a very interactive online community that gives people the opportunity to give feedback on specific issues in your community. It allows people to make specific suggestions and start a new conversation with people. It's really, I'm enthusiastic about that, and I look forward to sharing that with you when we get that rolling. We will eventually, there will be some polling. We've talked about doing some phone polling just to try to understand where people are at on the issue and get that feedback that way. We would look at doing a newsletter. Our next newsletter would be in July, and where we would basically give every home an access to the short version of this plan, with an opportunity to do a survey that way, online or on a postcard. I mean, so several ways that we would be looking to get feedback. And then in July, or in June, July, the task force is convening, listening to all that feedback, finalizing this recommendation, tweaking it as they see fit, and bringing it back to the board for the board to finalize and accept or revise as you see fit. November being the millage question date, that means the millage question would have to be approved at the first meeting in August. So timeline of delivering that in July, and then the board deliberating on it and making a final decision in August.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Just kind of sitting here wondering how I don't know if nimble is the right word or not, is the task force to this input from the public. And because what we've seen in the past recently with Genoa is they basically sat down and said, these are what we're going to do. And there was a lot of outcry from their residents that said, you picked the wrong projects, and they still went ahead with what their plan was, and they got pretty soundly defeated.
Yeah.
I understand that we're going to try and get public participation. How equipped are we to react to that and adapt our plan based on that public participation?
I feel confident in saying that they are, and maybe I can let some of the board members who sat with that task force answer the same question. The way that they approach these issues demonstrated not only, I think, wisdom, but humility and understand they may not feel they have all the answers, and acknowledge several examples where we think this is the best recommendation at this point. It'll be interesting to hear if there's a difference of opinion over that and have that impact. Just even on the millage amount alone, coming to that dollar amount involved a lot of acquiescing to this is where we're at now. If we hear that that's missing the mark, we're prepared to revisit that. So I think that would translate in all things. And we would be compiling that information, make sure that they're getting it, and having regular meetings with them for them to chew on that. Everybody recognizes if this does not represent the will of the majority of our residents, that this is a futile effort, and nobody's looking to make a futile effort. Nobody is sitting in an ivory tower picking projects. This is resident driven. Any comments from the board?
Do you have these available at the desk if people want to see them?
Not yet, because you've got a draft. There's some issues we still got to fix before we do that. We will have some. We'll have it available online, and we're going to get the word out pretty quick through we'll let people know that we've got a final draft of that plan for people to take a look at. And we'll start that social media and other conversations and public meetings. By the time we send something out in July, there may already be some revisions to it based on what the task force may be hearing, Sue. So
is it fair to say that the task force will be giving a recommendation to the board sometime in July or August, based on all the things that are going to go forward from here?
It's due from the task force to you by the end of July. I have no reason to doubt it'll get here by then, and there may even be an interim revision, because we'll be doing that polling here in the next couple of months, and that may tell us quite a bit that we may have to take a look at.
So the task force is charged with taking this draft, listening to what the other people have to say, coming back with an updated draft, as much as to say it's not worth even trying to, yes, let's go forward. It could be one of...
exactly.
Okay.
So are the public meetings that you're proposing, are they task force meeting with the public?
A little bit of both. I mean, we'll certainly have some here at regular board meeting. One, if not two. The first focus group is around a task force meeting, and that could have a pretty good turnout. And then some of those will be out in other public areas too. We'll try to make it accessible to the most. Is there consensus on moving forward with the draft of this version? I made note of some of the feedback for consideration on the pathways. Is there anything else? Or?
Well, one thing I don't see in here, and I know that this is citizen-driven, and that's, what we intended to do, but I don't see anything in here with regards to getting, I don't know how to put this, maybe getting some support from the school district, because I would think that if we improve our roads, it's going to save a considerable amount of money in cost repairs on school buses. I wonder if that can be measured. It doesn't matter which pocket it's coming out of, it's still coming out of our pocket.
Sure.
So I'm just wondering if
Joe, I think they may be prohibited from contributing any kind of money towards roads.
No, I'm talking about getting their support for that.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah, so this is a good opportunity to reiterate some things. I mean, one, we're not advocating for a yes vote on the millage, and I know that's not what you're saying either, but just a reminder for everybody's benefit, the township is presenting this question for the voters' consideration. We will actively communicate the answer to the question that a voter has a right to know. If we approve this, what will you do with the funds? And this is the answer to that. If the voters decide a no, then the voters have decided. So we don't advocate for it, and the schools, of course, couldn't do that either. The schools were invited to participate in the task force. Unfortunately, they weren't in a position to have representation there, although we certainly had a number of folks, represented families and others who are plugged into the schools. And in fact, some at least one I know, former teacher. So, but we'll certainly communicate to them what the plan is about.
Anything else this evening? On behalf of the board, I'd like to thank all the folks that are here tonight that participated in this. Thank you very much for your input and your valuable time, and the board members for their time in this, and staff. I think you've done a good job. You've covered a lot of the, P's and Q's through this so far, and it sounds like you've got a good plan in place, and we look forward to the updates as they come along. And I'm sure the task force would be open to any questions or anything.
Yeah.
And are you the point person for this project?
Well, we've got a number of staff working on it, but I can facilitate those conversations.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anything else this evening on that? We'll move on to new business, which we have none, and we'll go to board reports. This is our second meeting in February. Trustee Harper?
Board report.
Trustee Germain? No report this evening. Trustee Petrucci.
Just want to remind everybody that the Hartland Deerfield Fire Authority annual award ceremony will be on Friday, March the 7th at 7 o'clock. And I believe, did we get the auditorium at the high school? Got to be at the auditorium at the high school.
What date is that again, Joe?
Friday, March 7th, 7 o'clock. And it's quite informative. They put on a really nice presentation of what they've accomplished through the year, and it's quite informative. So if you can make it, fine. If you can't, I understand. But it'd be nice to see some board members there to support these guys.
6 o'clock.
7.
7 o'clock. Thank you. Clerk Hopkins?
I'd just like to mention to the voters that we do have an election coming up on May 5th. It's for the non-homestead property tax question, renewal. I will be expecting to send out absentee ballot applications to the people that have signed up to be on the permanent list in the first week of March, and we'll have them available for anybody that calls and requests one or comes in. We'll have the applications. We won't expect to have ballots until mid-March. So, yeah, end
You said
of
May
March.
5th?
May 5th,
This would
isn't
be May 6th. That would be a Tuesday, right?
Yeah, it is.
May 5th is...
Whatever the first Tuesday in May is. Sorry if I missed.
Yep, it'd be May 6th.
Okay. Yep, May 6th. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Thank you. Anything else?
That's it for me.
Trustee Colini?
I just want to congratulate the Hartland wrestling team. This is the 13th year in a row they've made it to the team state finals at Battle Creek. They'll be competing for a state championship as a team. They're seated second. Those that can attend, first match will be on Friday at 3 o'clock against Macomb, Dakota. And this is one of the most impressive teams they've had in a long time. And just wish them luck and congratulations.
Thank you. Earlier this month, I had an opportunity to go to... I'm sorry. Yeah.
Did you get Matt already?
I thought I did.
I'm sorry.
Did I miss you, though?
Yes.
I thought I did. Okay, thanks. I had a chance to go to the county Board of Commissioners to their Finance Committee, and I expressed our concerns for road patrol, and as they go forward with jail, that they keep in mind that communities like ourselves and all the rural areas that do not have their own police protection are counting on them to continue the road patrols, and if that's going to change in any significant manner, that they let us know early enough so we can adjust accordingly. And they said that they would do that. There's a task force, as you probably read in the paper right now, that's working on the funding of the actual jail and how that's going to affect staffing levels for road patrols. So I just want to let you know that I did go there on behalf of the township and just ask the question. It was brief. They were nice enough to let me be first in their agenda, but to express our concerns as we go forward. If that changes in any significant manner, that they keep us abreast so we can make address the issue accordingly. I have nothing else at this point. Manager Whitman, you have a report this night?
Yes, just briefly, wanted to highlight a couple things from the operational report to call out. You may have noticed it mentioned a couple times over the past few months that AT&T had expressed an interest in siting a wireless tower at Heritage Park. Be back towards the tree line behind the parking lot. Right now, it's just a site selector. We're working with a third party, and so those conversations are starting to pick up, and so obviously that is something the board will ultimately have to approve and make you aware of that. If the board's inclined to approve that, there's some, obviously, in addition to the lease revenue, would be opportunity to help bring back electrical service and possibly even sharing a building cost back there, but wanted to highlight that for the board's knowledge. And then another thing I've been working on, a residential market analysis, as we prepare for the master plan and as we look at, where the sewer system is at and potential for connections, and really economic development basis. We had been kicking around the idea of trying to do some of the homework for the developers, so to speak, of doing an analysis of the residential market in this area to take a look at what are the housing needs, the pent-up demand for what type of housing stock, whether that be lot size or, rentals or multifamily or starter homes or condos or what have you. That would be something that would just apply to really anywhere in the township, any of the vacant lands that are available, so the developers could know what is the market demand and what kind of price point the market is holding on those. And then they, by doing some of that analysis for them, that we believe that could help spur some of these subdivisions that had stalled and get that going again. It's not a small task, and there are a limited number of people, I think, in the country that do that well. I think the opportunity is there, though, to take a look at even a grant to maybe offset that through the Michigan State Housing Development Authority does offer a grant for this. I'm waiting to hear back from them. If we can make it work, we can take a $30,000 plan, and it would cost us $15,000. So as I get more information, I'll bring it back, but I wanted to make you aware we're looking at that. Just let you know as well, the Hero Center this week, the windows are getting replaced later this week, so you'll see that activity happening. Related to that, I think when we pop those windows out, you're going to try to fit a truck cab through them. Is that into the training area? So you'll see some activity around that.
Driving down the road and you see a truck cabin
going into the, don't worry, the fire's on town. And those zoning ordinance amendments, the last round of those are going to the County Planning Commission on Thursday, so I expect to see those at the next meeting. Otherwise, happy to answer any questions you have on anything in the operational report or otherwise.
I think we're all set. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 11 is discussion. It's our 2015-16 budget work session.
So we made it through the general fund. Yeah, it's fiscal year ending, and this is 2 years, so, yeah, fiscal year ending 15 and fiscal year ending 16. I know we thought we made it through the general fund, and we did. I just want to highlight a couple of updates for your benefit that are in the copy. It's some small things, but as we get better information, we plug it into there. So there's just a couple of things there. We have, first of all, the board had made a decision regarding my compensation, so that had been incorporated into the budget. We received some information about one of the memberships in the assessing department. There had been a bit of an increase there that had not been budgeted for, so we did update that to accommodate that. When I had cut the communications budget from what had been requested in salaries, we had not yet brought down the FICA costs on that, and so that's been updated. And then we did make the change that we did note here last time for the zoning ordinance enforcement for legal expenses in the second year. Inadvertently still had $30,000 there. We knocked that down to $5,000 and corrected that. One other thing that I wanted to bring your attention to that I failed to do, because it's in the second year of this, we've got, I had made a recommendation for consideration in the second year of an internship program, and I just want to pull that up here. No, that's not it. And that's, you find that under unallocated. The thing, I just wanted to highlight that. Obviously, the board's not approving that second-year budget. And but what I've put in is $6,000 for consideration, that basically on an as-needed basis, that it would give an opportunity to any of the departments, depending on what activities or projects they had going on, and it would be quasi-competitive, is that they would, make the proposal to say, we've got this going on this year, we think we could use a paid intern, a very qualified grad or undergrad student to help us with that, and get a good value for that, and give them good education out of the experience for a summer paid internship of $6,000. So I had put that in there under unallocated. I did not want to skip over that. And so you'll see that was that unallocated? Where I put that?
It is an unallocated.
Okay.
But what happened was that there was no dollar amount to it, and that's a new category.
I see.
It was all zeros, and so unfortunately the footnote didn't show up. So it didn't translate over into this document.
Which is why I missed it. Okay. So that'll be considered. I just wanted to plant the seed for that is something I'd like to propose to do next year. Were there, at risk of opening up general fund again, were there any other questions or thoughts since we wrapped up general fund last time? Okay. Then we can take a look at the other funds.
James, is fire going to be next?
Yeah, we can do that next.
Adam's here.
Yeah.
He's got to head out, or
Yep.
be nice to move our agenda if that's okay for the board to...
Well, it would be, fire fund is next, 206, so come on down if you want. It's a little bit slow reacting here, but... I don't, the budget itself is pretty straightforward. I guess, Adam, if you want to make any highlights.
Sure. So honestly, the sole change from this year, I guess it is this year to what we're proposing for next year, completely revolves around our scheduled staffing. What we are proposing is continuing the same scheduled staffing plan that we have in place right now, that runs from 7 a.m. Monday morning to 5 p.m. Friday night, and extending it across the weekend to make it a complete 24/7 operation, which puts 2 people on staff out of the main station around the clock. That staffing level goes up a little bit during the day when we're shorter, but that piece is already in place. What we're looking to do is close that gap from Friday evening until Monday morning. A handful of reasons for that. I can tell you the primary ones that we were looking at is on-call staff management, as far as burnout as time increase goes by and call volume increases. What we see, like in any place, is that folks have got so much time, and answering a lot of times the number of calls that we run, in particular on the weekends, will start to wear on them. It's the same thing that we saw during the weeknights, which is the reason that we put that staffing in place, to take a little bit of that load off of folks so that they could actually get some sleep and go to work the next day. And a similar situation we run into in the week. The other piece that this provides, in addition to completing that staffing loop, is putting a command officer in place all the time. There's one on-duty command officer, in other words, someone from the captain level or higher, who is the on-duty commanding officer, for lack of a better term, immediately available all the time. Now, what does that mean? You can pick up your phone right now. Can you call me? Yeah, it's not vibrating. I hear it, but that's not really what we're looking for. What we're looking for from that command staff officer is somebody who can, in essence, make those immediate decisions for immediate actions that we're about to take. Who's readily available, on duty, paying attention, not getting out of bed, not coming from grocery shopping, or whatever it is. Having that person in place to handle that business. Where we get stretched then, generally, especially at the command staff level, is certainly on weekends. Folks have got, obviously, jobs and activities and all of that stuff, and it seems that, at least since I was a kid, it seems like it's gotten far worse. But that is included in here also. Other than that, everything else is pretty much held the line. So, yes, sir.
If you, in light of the fact that you're going to have, what's it, 2 new full-time staff?
Well, it would be a combination of. Currently, we have 4 full-time staff, and then we have basically shifts available that our on-call people fill. And right now, we're on a 10-14 schedule. It's a 10-hour day shift and a 14-hour night shift. And they basically bid for the shifts and get awarded them. They are.
So are you going to hire new people, or are you using to fill those spots with existing?
Yeah, both. Our proposal includes being able to hire 1 additional full-time employee, and the rest of those shifts being filled out of the on-call staff.
And
I guess is the answer to the question.
have we looked on the revenue side in light of we contract with the southern, or with Tyrone for the southern portion of their runs, correct?
Correct.
Have we looked on the revenue side of adjusting that to accommodate the fact that we are hiring new staff folks? Because I still, think that they should be part of the Tyrone, or Hartland, Deerfield, Tyrone organization. They're not. Now they want to contract with us. So my guess is that I think that we should reflect something in the revenue side. Have we done that?
We specifically know the current contract structure has built-in steps to it as it goes on. I can tell you with the utmost confidence that we are on the correct side of that equation. So as these steps come along and increase, because of, honestly, the cost control measures that we have in place, that margin continues to get wider. But have we specifically asked for or proposed a contract adjustment for that reason? No. We could. Would not. I would certainly be happy to do so.
What do you see as driving the necessity of hiring another full-time staff? What is it? What's the driving force of that?
The full-time position would be probably about 60%, maybe 70% reasoning in that being a command officer who I can basically count on and put on duty along with the blend of the other full-time employees, self-included, to cover those shifts to ensure that one of us is always on. The other 30 to 40%, depending on how it shakes out, is to create some breathing room in that on-call staff to be a little more picky-choosy and not be subject to some of the call volume increases that we get. And it's a combination of things. It's not just call volume increase. It's call pattern. And I hate to even call it that because there is no such thing. I'll tell you, we run right around 1,000 calls a year right now. And that's about as consistent as the economy. We ran 1,100, I think, 2 years ago. We came in a little under 900 the year after. We're headed right back for probably 1,100 or 1,200 again this year. And then they come in groups, of course. Rarely does a 12-hour period go without us turning a tire on something. But there are plenty of times when instead in that 12-hour period we'll handle 7 calls. So it's that inconsistent frequency, especially for on-call staff, when they're being asked to do it overnight during the week, and then just from an availability standpoint over the weekend, that becomes pretty taxing.
So-
my best interest, of course, and the department's best interest, and honestly the township, is to maintain that on-call staffing. And from a retention standpoint, it's much better, and the volume is available for them to stay plenty proficient and come to the calls that they know they're actually needed on. Because it's another big part of on-call fire service response is that you don't know who's coming. So there are a number of occasions outside of scheduled staffing hours when what we call a single company call will come in, and I'll have 10, 12, 14 guys show up. Why? Because they didn't know if they were going to be needed or not.
Do you pay for everyone that comes in?
Absolutely, yeah.
So the call goes out, you don't, there's no controls in place to say, this is a fender bender with somebody with a car on fire. So I don't know. I mean, there isn't specific call. So it's just a call and see and people show up. I thought there was some sort of controls over that.
Very few. Very few. Honestly, the primary control I can think of right now is when we get into single company calls, we go down to a station dispatch system. So in other words, if it's in Hartland Township, just the 61, the main station gets notified. When it's a call out towards the northern end and upper Tyrone, if it's a single company call, just the Partial station gets notified. If it's in Deerfield, same. As you get up into multi-company calls, 2-3 vehicles due on the call type, no, it's an all-call department response. Rarely do we have large groups of people standing around. Again, once folks are there for a while, they get a feel for what calls they could be beneficial on and what they don't, and they don't come to them. Or they'll do the drive-by. They'll be headed there, they'll hear that first rig or two hit the road, and they'll turn around and head home. Controls, no, primarily because we haven't had any issues with them, and I don't expect any. Our staff is pretty motivated, obviously, to do the right thing, period. But really just want to show up if they can do something, if they can be of use. A lot of times, if there's that extra 2 to 3 people around the station, based on the way our calls come and clumps quite regularly, those are the folks that are available for that next call while their first crew is out on the other one. And that happens with normal frequency also. If not, while they're at the station, we've got a laundry list of stuff that they're generally doing, from maintenance to cleaning to training to all kinds of things.
Years ago, Joe, and it's gotten a lot better over time. Years ago, when a call went out, there'd be 15, 16 guys show up, and it would be a standard medical. And the township did pay. This is going back a few years, but they were all like that. All the townships were like that. But they did pay for all 16 guys to show up. And over the years, though, what Adam has done through his officers is that if a firefighter shows up, it's because he is qualified for that run. If he's not educated in the medical end of it, and there's a medical call comes out, he is not supposed to come up to the hall, and he is told that if he does come up there, because that kind of streamlines the guys that are going to show up are the guys that are going to be qualified for that particular kind of run. So that's the only kind of mechanism that's really in place to kind of control that. But years ago, you saw everybody would show up, so. It was just gotten a lot better, but there's still room for improvement. But and that's, we have a very trained quality fire department too. That these guys are trained in many different levels. So when there is runs, they're mostly all qualified. So we don't have people that come up there that aren't qualified to do the run.
Wasn't there discussion on capital outlay?
Pardon me?
Wasn't there discussion on a capital outlay of something within the budget?
No, it was mainly.
I thought you were looking at not too long ago buying a truck at a certain point because you got a better deal on it.
That was.
Was that a year ago?
6 months ago.
Yeah,
6, 7 months ago.
Did we already do that?
Yeah, 7 months ago.
So where does that show up in this year's budget?
It's within the fire authority budget.
Yeah,
It's in the fire authority budget.
it would be out of the,
You're looking at the fire fund budget, which contributes to the fire authority. So I had a question. There was some discussion. Joe had brought up this. I don't know if you were here a few weeks ago. And one of the questions was when you guys went, or when the ballot proposal was put forward a couple years ago, and a 10-year millage was proposed, and kind of you guys analyzed, based on growth and things like that, would 10 years be sustainable at the same millage rate? And this, I don't know that this structure was contemplated in that analysis. And I know Joe said that the hope is that with this new command officer that there would actually be a cost savings, but it has to be put in place before you actually can analyze and realize. Where do we stand if it doesn't? I mean, if cost savings doesn't come along with it?
Well, I think it will. I think there's a much better chance that it will, Larry, only because we've already implemented this program for 80% of the week, and it's already cut down considerably on the amount of people that show up for runs. So by eliminating this for the remaining portion of the weekend, which gives the township a 24/7 fire department, it's going to eliminate excess people coming up to that hall, because there's going to be people on duty right there to take that call. So we've already realized that, haven't we, in our budget when we implemented this a few years ago for the night shift? So there's no reason to believe it's not going to continue but it takes time to realize that, and you'll see it. And it's hard to measure because every year it seems like the runs go up, so it's hard to measure it. But we have seen it with the Monday through Friday. So I don't see why we wouldn't see it Friday through Monday.
And that's just add. I've got to do the Chicken Little thing because that's what I'm supposed to do. That is certain. We're in year 2 of a 10-year millage, and last year's contribution went up more than inflation. This year's is slated to do that. Obviously, we can't sustain it. We had updated that 10-year model here, and we had distributed those, and we took a look at if we're trying to maintain that fund balance at the level that we keep it at. Basically, what's the maximum increase that the fire authority contribution can go up to, and that's this number that's tracked. Last year, this is what last year's was, this is what year's the most it could be. It's going up more than that, which is going to eat into that fund balance, but as you look down through the rest of the 10 years, you can see that, we can't afford to have increases of this size sustained for the remaining 10 years. So hopefully at some point we start to realize, and I know the last 2 years have been anomalies. We looked at previous year's contribution changes, and they were certainly less than inflation. We need that to return to make it through the last 8 years. So that I trust that will be, we'll start to realize that, but we'll need to.
Has this information been conveyed to the...
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're obviously very sensitive to it. What you don't have on the chart is to look back. And I can tell you, basically from 08, 09 fiscal through the present, that average for Hartland Township has been, if you average each year, 1.8% per year. This current budget is over the 4.3 projected, about 1.1% over it, which is about $12,700 more than what was budgeted for the year. Budget amount was $985, came in at about $997. That 1.8 average, while I look back to 08, the reason I went back to 08 is that was when we were back to your Tyrone word, and I agree with you, by the way. That's when we finished with the Tyrone litigation costs and everything else that went on. So that was kind of our first year back to what the normal Hartland Deerfield Fire Authority operation was going to be. From that point forward, that's been our experience. Year by year, if I were to, go back and basically pluck that down, it wouldn't change that much. The reason for that is the cycles from 11-12 and 12-13 were pretty substantial decreases, actually. So while it might go up a little, that 1.8 wouldn't move a whole lot, even if we had a couple of years on. In fact, the last couple of years were increases, so we'll probably go the other way.
And we're hoping and trusting these are anomalies, exceptions to the rule, and that we get back to those.
Yeah, they absolutely are. And the reason for that is we're basically changing.
Now, what's the driver that's causing this?
Call volume management of on-call staffing and weekend coverage.
So the anticipation is by going to this full-time or 24/7 on the weekends, covering that last 20%, going to now 100%. That should be reduced. Those number of calls, or I mean, how you
no, what we spend on total payroll and how much control we have over that payroll will change a bit.
Okay. So suppose they have 15 people show up, that person makes the call and says we only need 2.
Right, and then the flip side of that, if you swing that pendulum the other way, is we have a couple weekends where we're running 6, 7, 8 calls a day over the weekend, and by the time late Saturday night comes and Sunday comes, I'm getting 1, 2, 3 people show up for calls. It kind of...
The level of service drops.
Is it clear that what the chief is doing is by making these, having people at the station, that prevents, if it's just a one, what's the term?
Typical medical.
A one-unit caller, all those guys don't get called in, all right? It's handled by the people that are there, so they don't have this mass call-in where everybody shows up. So that's how the cost gets reduced, because now they have staffing.
I understand that. That's what my point was. I mean, I'm looking at the fact that if we add it's kind of like the old story. You add one more employee, how much is my rate of, the old economies of scale? What am I looking at? Because I don't want to, I want to see what we're doing. I mean, we're not seeing a drop in calls. We're seeing, because they're roughly the same. He's already indicated that they're between 900 and 1,300 or 1,200 calls per year. So we're not seeing a dramatic increase in calls. But what we have is how we manage those calls. And if we manage those calls, then it reduces costs. By adding someone that's full-time, I think that's good. But I want to see how that works. I just don't know what the driver is. I don't quite fully understand why the driver is, why we're seeing the greater percentage.
Well, those two are specific. The rest of the years are projections, and this thought exercise was just how much could we afford to see that contribution go up without breaking the bank? And that's where those percentages are. These aren't projections of what those will actually be.
Right.
This was just, okay. One thing I should point out, something I'm really looking forward to, and I think will benefit and help these conversations down the road, is we are participating with the Michigan Local Government Benchmarking Consortium, and I know you had received that. I don't know how we've got to talk about that yet. Right. But we'll have the opportunity to take a look at data, from our authority, looking at other departments across the state, and kind of get a better picture of how the operation is, the quality of service, those things. So looking forward to that. I think that'll help.
It might be worthwhile, too, to mention that this new full-time employee, the benefits are different than the rest of the current full-time employees, because that was changed by the Fire Authority Board, and it might be worthwhile to mention that.
You have a closed plan now.
Back to the budget part, I did, painted basically our past track record plus this proposal. Again, it's basically the balance of the 7 years taken out to that 2022 range, which is about the millage cycle. And based on our past 6-year track record, including this proposal, we would be right in line with that. And the reason for that is, like anything, there's no flat line. So with those same fluctuations, with the experience that we've had operating in this environment since 2008 and 9, which was that, like I mentioned before, that first stable year, paying that over the 7 years literally puts us within $11,000 of total costs, over $8 million between now and then. And those are projections. Happy to hold me to them.
Wasn't part of the millage that we are bringing in goes to, I'm going back to capital improvements because I'm confused here. In the budget that I have in front of me, it's got principal and interest for the ladder truck for 3 years. But where is that money? There's money coming in for replacement of equipment as it comes down the road.
Correct.
And that doesn't show up on
That
here.
is not in that one. The ladder truck is...
The ladder truck is in here.
Owned by the township and came out of the 206 fund. It's subsequently been paid off.
But it's in this budget.
It had been in past years.
Had been passed.
This isn't.
I think you're looking at the township's capital budget, correct? Or is that the 206 one?
I'm looking at the one that James has.
Well, this was the 10-year model, and the specific budget in front of us is much more narrow. It's
I'm just looking for somewhere on the budget I have here that there's additional dollars coming in. At some point, you're buying another tanker truck, you're buying a pickup truck, or that type of thing.
the balance of those are going through the authority. Part of the contribution that we give to the authority goes to their capital fund to set aside for those purchases. So we don't see it in the budget.
I would like to see that reflected in this budget.
You wouldn't see it in our budget, but you do have, we did distribute copies of the authority budget. I can send the budget folder, Susan.
That's incorporated into the contribution by the township.
I'll find it.
Ours is now towards the bottom. Transfers from capital. That's $5,000.
But all I'm looking for is how does this all...
It doesn't.
But it should. Somewhere, if we got X amount of dollars coming in, you're spending X on operations.
No, it's not coming into the 206 fund. The 206 fund is the township's millage fund that collects those dollars.
Right?
Out of that fund, you'll see a line item for payments to the fire authority.
Right?
Out of that payment to the fire authority comes your portion of that $135,000, which is 81.some% of it. And that's in a separate capital fund that the fire authority has. It's not in that, but that's just the 206 fund budget to the township.
So we change it after we pay off the ladder truck. We change it.
We've always done it that way, with the exception had been the ladder truck because we said that's an asset that's owned by Hartland Township for Hartland Township.
The ladder truck is the only anomaly in the mix. The rest of the trucks are saved for and purchased out of the fire authority's capital fund, which is not what we have.
Can we get a copy of that so we just have an idea what's coming down the road?
Yeah, that it had been distributed before. We can make sure that gets redistributed.
I probably have it in here somewhere.
Yeah, sure.
Just I thought it would be tied right to this.
Okay.
Somehow.
So, can I ask you a couple questions? I think you just took it off the screen, but the Hartland Township Fire Operating 10-year projection that you have up here.
Yes.
This has actual values for the past 3 years, projected for our next fiscal year, and then forecasted out to 2022.
Yes.
In the email you had sent to Adam, you said, I'm concerned about the projected cost higher than what had been originally estimated.
Yes.
I'm kind of paraphrasing it. And what I hear Adam saying is that that's because we're making some changes to improve
Yes.
and therefore our fees going up. And what he's explained, and actually Joe Petrucci had told us about this change coming several weeks ago. So I understand that, but did this table Excel table you created, I assume you did, but was that done before you got his values? In other words, has this 4% this year been projected on out?
No, we updated this again. These are not projected fire authority contributions. This was how much can we afford for these to keep going up and still, have a black budget in the black. That's what.
Now, And that's what I was getting at, because I know we have a fire millage that was set for a set dollar.
Yes.
So I'm wondering how our revenue, because we're collecting money, moving it through here and over to the fire authority.
Yeah, pretty much.
How are we still, I mean, if we include this projection in our Hartland Township budget, is there enough revenue streaming in to accomplish this?
Yeah, we have fund balance there to work with. What needs to happen is we can't have 8 more years of 5% increases. That's what we can't have. So the sky hasn't fallen yet. We're in year 2 of year 10. We've had a couple anomalies in year 1 and year 2. And we'll do the best we can to make sure that future years aren't like that anomaly.
But if, maybe it's too late and I'm going on 4 hours of sleep, but if our population starts growing again in our community, we're going to collect more money to pay for the extra expenses the fire department has, right?
Yeah, if run and activity increases correlate with increased taxable value, yeah, we would hope that they stay in line with each other, and that could change the model, yes.
So why don't we move on? It sounds like this is a no-brainer. Now that I understand it.
I've got a lot more questions, Matt. I'm just kidding.
I'll yield.
No, I'm all done. I'd just like to see the whole picture, and it just seems like without the capital equipment in here, that we're not.
The capital equipment's in the other budget. You have to look at the other budget.
I know that, but I don't have that in front of me.
Oh, we'll get you.
Thank you. Usually when you pass a budget, there's only one.
Yeah,
2 different boards.
yeah, if we don't pass it.
I understand that, but still our money's going to that, right?
What's that?
Our money passes through to that budget, though.
Sorry.
Well, the townships do have to approve that budget.
I understand.
So, yeah.
We haven't approved that yet.
No, we would do that at the same time we approve the rest of the budgets.
Okay. Anything else on fire? Nope. Thank you for your time. Very safe.
Thanks, Adam. Thank you. The meeting next on Thursday, moving to Wednesday. Yes. You saw that?
Is this going to 590?
Yeah.
We can do that one. Yeah.
Are we still in order here? Or
Well, we'd be skipping ahead, but if we...
on a different... I'm just going through what I had on your agenda.
Oh, I see. Because we had attached a couple of additional attachments. The portfolio has all the budgets themselves, and then the rest of those attachments are supplemental information or updates to those budgets.
You have the floor, so however you want to proceed.
Okay. So then I'll go, and every time I do this goes slow for some reason. Cemetery fund. Any questions?
Which fund are you on?
Cemetery 209.
206. Oh, yeah.
There was some discussion about repairing some fences. Do we have a number for that?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Did we budget anything for that?
Well, I put in, I kept in the same amount for repairs and maintenance. We've kind of used that money for headstone repair over the last couple of years. So I kind of look at it as, the thing that, it's there for emergency tree,
The cemetery,
cutting,
yeah.
and things like that. So it's kind of fluid that it can move to where the repairs.
The fences is on the CIP list. So
As one of the ranked.
as one of the rank ones, so that could be coming back to that. Other questions on cemetery? I don't want to waste your time on it. It's pretty straightforward. liquor law enforcement, then 212, that's similar. We do use those for inspections with Tony, and then we also are contracting with the Sheriff Department for underage buy stings. So that's what that's used for. Several of these are SADs that we adopt budgets for. There really isn't anything interesting happening per se. We're collecting assessments to pay the bonds for Rolling Hills, for the M59 improvements, for Hartland Shores. Any questions on any of those SADs? 401 fund is capital project fund. At this point, we're just budgeting those things that the board had identified early last month to look at. And that was the village sidewalks, $40,000, and then $50,000 for the memorial. And then $6,800 was plugged in for trash cans in the parks. Those the large ticket items, of course, will come back to the board for approval before we move forward with those. Any questions on those? Water fund, water and sewer are both continuing to follow the rate study that we did just a couple of years ago. Everything in water is looking good. Separate from this, CIP is separate from this, and it's not a budget that's adopted per se, but when those expenses are incurred, they do come to the board for approval. And those, some of that is shown in the 539, the reserve and replacement, where the CIP works through. That's where the depreciation expenses are now at, instead of in the water operating and maintenance, O&M fund. I'm jumping around, but on 536, I don't know if there were any questions on anything. Most of that, of course, goes to the contract operator. Really nothing major difference in the operation, or certainly not different than what we looked at in the rate study. We, of course, will be taking a look at that operation and seeing if there's any opportunity to save through in-house operation of the water plant. Any questions on 536, 537, or 539? Those are all water. Okay. 577, cable peg. No real significant thing there. We obviously receive those PEG funds, and we identify projects to invest in those. This was a pretty busy year for the PEG fund because we did build out office. We purchased some equipment. We invested in the Minute Track, the IQM2 stuff. So a lot of activity this year. Next year we'll continue to look at improving, our cable broadcasts, look at video equipment as needed, things like that.
James, we're going to look at some potential camera stuff for like the Memorial Day Parade. Were we going to look at that this year, or are we just going to hire somebody to do it?
Yeah, we're going to contract that. Okay. We don't. Okay. Not there yet.
Okay.
Someday.
All right.
So that was in the general fund.
That's correct.
Yep. Any questions on 5 to 77 PEG? So the last set, of course, are 590 sewer. And before we go into that, we should probably talk about the update to the Boyle model. We had distributed that at the last meeting. We didn't really have time to talk about it, and definitely want to take that time. There's, if you've had a chance to look at that, you know that there's some good news there, a lot of good news, I should say, that basically with all the updated factors and everything that's happened, we're in a position now where we do not have to look at refinancing that second bond. And with that being the case, we have enough cash, and the model projects that we can continue to operate through 2029 without consideration for selling any of the property. So if we sell any property between now and then, which we all hope we do, that's to the benefit of this model. And of course, if RUs start performing better than they have been, that's more benefit. One thing in particular that could be of interest, and this came about from some board discussion on this, was kind of taking a look at what RU sales were meant to be and what they have been, and that actually gives a good picture of how that's worked. From the original Stouter-Barch financial analysis, there were a certain number of RUs that needed to sell in these years, and then we updated that in the Boyle model for the factors then, and we updated for the rate study. The bottom line is actual RU sold, as you can see, is performing better than the models had anticipated. That's a good thing. That's, of course, we have been historically selling at a rate that exceeded the need. Now, we need to sustain that, and that also, selling these RUs is also helping to offset another part of the equation. That is, there was an assumption made that a certain number of RUs would come online, and we can look at that in a minute. That this is helping that situation as well, but these are good things, and this has helped the cash position that we find ourselves in. I won't, the columns are color-coded, so hopefully you can sort of follow it, but I won't try to relive the Boyle model all over again, but just to say, obviously the factor here is the cash balance in 590, and it starts to get low in the later years. And if we sell land, if we sell RUs, if everybody comes current, we're in great shape. And we're in solid shape right now.
I know it's a side note. I know that recently there was an article in today's paper about having the counties have the ability to reduce the interest rate on the tax delinquent revolving fund.
Yeah.
Would in light of what I know the Boyle model does take into consideration those tax parcels that we bought and the interest, would that affect us as well?
Not necessarily. If you recall, the high rate applied to if the county was using cash they had on hand.
Okay.
If they borrow to fund the delinquent fund, they can only charge something in the range of their borrowing rate, which is much more reasonable.
Right.
And that's what we're...
12%?
No, it's
like 18 or something?
3 to 5%. Or
4 or 5%.
Right. The old one, yeah, was...
The old one was
18%. I think it was 18%, wasn't it?
Yeah, so
it was like usury.
Like 4.5%.
Yeah, so we're already protected in that the county ran out of cash and they had to borrow it. So that interest rate has not been so harsh.
And this Boyle model, has it gone on the road quite a bit?
I mean, we've certainly, we had an opportunity to present it a couple years ago at a state conference, and I've certainly shared it in conversations. My goal someday is to write an article for MTA on it. I keep promising them I'll do it, but we're certainly at the forefront of this. There's no question.
Right, and the only reason is we also have some Board of Commissioner members, and probably some Board of Public Work members. They're going to be less reluctant to bond projects because of a lot of the problems that they've had. I think having this model maybe presented to like, the chairperson of the County Board of Commissioners and maybe county administrator again, and bring them in, kind of show them what we did to ensure that we're no different than what they do when they're looking at trying to fund their unfunded mandate or their unfunded liabilities related to pension and healthcare retiree and everything else, where they go out and they hire an actuary and they're looking at what they need to do and give them some assurance that I think that this township board, as well as staff in particular, has done a pretty darn good job of projecting what we needed to do to cash flow this
Sure.
these hard times.
Yeah.
He promised to give us what he uses as follows.
Oh, yeah, no, he hasn't. I don't know if anybody's taken him up on it. Any questions about the model? I'll transition over to, so the attachments that you have are updated budgets for 590, 595, 596, because they were still pending the update to the model, kind of a chicken and the egg thing, but so you've got updated numbers there. Sewer, O&M, similar to water, really nothing too exciting to report on. We're keeping in line with what the rate study had said, and we're continuing to work our way up towards black.
Just had one other question. The septic receiving station money, is that in the Boyle model?
Yes.
Is it under revenue from operating?
It's on the third page in the purple, septic host revenue.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yep, got it.
Any questions?
Got a question back on the Boyle stuff.
Okay.
When you say it doesn't contemplate any sales property, it does include the sale of the Clyde Road land, though, or no?
Yes. That assumption is built in.
So after the fact, we're adding them back into the model?
Yeah, once we know. But basically the pieces on a 59 and behind Hartland Glen aren't assumed to be sold in this. If they are, that's to the benefit.
Okay.
When they are, not if. Yeah.
Does the Boyle model contemplate us having to purchase any additional properties? Because I think that's a likelihood.
Yes, there's still the remaining possibility of what may happen with the last piece, and that'll probably be several years out.
Yeah, I projected out that well, there's a very small piece.
Oh, yeah,
Still
there's two pieces.
And he got some information afterwards, after I finished this, that it might still be at least another year before that one goes to casino. But I had projected out this coming year that we would release that property. And 2 years from now, by the elections. And those are the only two pieces that I see.
Any other questions on sewer? What do we have, Forest Brook yet, or we?
Forest Brook's there. It's another SAD.
Yeah.
Pretty self-explanatory. Happy to answer any questions on it if you have any.
It's really more about casting vehicle
Yep.
into 5 minutes.
Is that project done or being completed this spring?
They're done. It's connected.
It's all done,
Yep.
okay.
Got 2 bills now. Right.
James, is there anything else this evening?
Just thank Susan for her hard work on the budget every year, and it's more work every year. as we get more and more complicated.
But you guys looking through it goes a whole lot faster.
So we will post the March 4th meeting as the budget hearing and have everything ready for the board's consideration of approval.
You'll have some hard copies here for folks.
Yes, it's available 7 days. What's the? Yeah.
6 days, and the date that it's published in the paper. So
Yeah,
that
okay.
would be, Wednesday.
Okay.
And then I think we'll run some extra copies for people that show up.
Yeah. A couple of years ago, there was some questions on that.
We'll make copies and nobody will show up. No problem.
Any other board members have any questions this evening? Yeah, I'd like to thank the staff for putting the budget together, and on top of that, though, the Safer Roads and Pathways, you guys did a lot of work on that, so thank you for your efforts. Anything else this evening? Nope. Entertain a motion to adjourn. Move. Support. Motion by Matt Germain, second by Trustee Harper. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you.